Hey everybody, Tim here with today's episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 6, Episode 20, The Chase. So to be honest, I'm not really sure if I love this episode or hate this episode. It kind of goes both ways. I feel like it's an interesting episode, but it had the potential to be a lot more. And this is almost a movie quality type of episode. But then again, is it really needed? So this episode was intended to kind of answer the question of why do all of Star Trek aliens look the same? If you go back to the original series, it kind of boils down just to budget. Because if you look at most of the aliens, not all of them, but most of them, they're either very humanoid or they're giant space clouds. So this episode was kind of intended to answer that question. Why do all of them basically have one head, two arms, two legs, and a torso, and not a variety of different types of species? So it starts off pretty basic. Picard meets an old professor of his, Professor Galen, which is pretty interesting because this is the oldest living actor that has ever been in Star Trek. He was 78 years old when this episode came out, and he's still alive today. He's 104, so, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And they mentioned that I think they said he was coming off of Deep Space 4, so it's interesting that they're trying to incorporate the Deep Space Nine stations into the series. So he's an archaeologist, and he's trying to bait Picard into coming with him to look at this piece of something, little statue, and from the third dynasty of some long forgotten civilization. But that means Picard would have to leave the Enterprise. And so, of course, obviously Picard can't do that, so he kind of just sends Professor Galen off by himself, and Galen gets killed. So now Picard feels obligated to kind of finish his research, and in doing so, he finds basically what's a piece of a puzzle in our DNA. And he's working on it, Beverly's working on it, Geordi's working on it, and it turns out that there's 19 different planets that are all incorporated into this program puzzle. And to kind of jump to the end, they go there, and so the Enterprise is there. There's 2 Cardassian ships, a Romulan ship, and a Klingon battlecruiser. And so all 4 of them are basically on a race to get to the end of Professor Galen's research, which I think it's interesting that there's a Romulan ship and not a Vulcan ship, which they mentioned Vulcans at the very first part of this episode. But I mean, realistically, Romulans and Vulcans came from the same branch. They have the same ancestor, so I guess Vulcans weren't needed, but I think it would have been interesting to see their perspective of this. So they get to this planet, they put together all the puzzles, and this woman appears of some species, which to me she looks a lot like a changeling, like Odo from Deep Space Nine, and it's kind of funny because that particular actress plays a changeling later on in Deep Space Nine. But just the eyes and stuff. So she appears and she basically says we're explorers. We took parts of our DNA and put them in the primordial ooze of the planet and just kind of wanted to see what would pop up, basically. And so their DNA is what spawned all of our DNAs, or at least humans, Romulans, Klingons, and Cardassians. And to just kind of let them evolve on their own and to see if they'd ever come together. And so, like I said, it's an interesting concept that this one species is basically responsible for all of these other species' growths. But we got 45 minutes to tell this very complex story. And like I said, even the way that this episode is shot, where we're focusing on Professor Galen and then Galen's death, and now this puzzle race, and then the final payoff, it felt very cinematic to me. This could have easily have been a movie. And personally, I think if they had done a next, obviously they did Next Generation movies, but I felt like this could have been a better one to start with rather than Generations. I don't know. That's just kind of my opinion. Just random trivia. This was directed by Jonathan Frakes, so clearly it's good. And maybe that's why it felt cinematic to me. Maybe just subconsciously I realized that it was Jonathan Frakes, because I always forget to look at the very beginning. And I think of Jonathan Frakes from Insurrection and First Contact, so maybe I just knew. And they mentioned that there are 17 people aboard the Enterprise that are not part of the Federation, which I think is interesting, because I had a conversation about, like, how do you apply for different spots on the Enterprise? Like, do you apply to be a waiter? Or like Mott, did he apply to be a Starfleet barber? Well, that doesn't necessarily mean he's part of the Federation. So I never thought about the Federation reaching out and offering jobs to non-Federation people. So, like, it just keeps getting deeper. There's a lot of layers to this. So for those who have seen this one, did you like how they provided an explanation on why most species look the same? Or did you think it was completely unneeded? Do you think this episode could have been a movie, or do you think it's fine as an episode? Go ahead, let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for everything, and I will see you guys next time for Frame of Mind.